Okay, so as most of you probably know, Alberta has a really long history in water management, starting back even before we were a province with some of the irrigation water acts before the turn of the century. But for us, we focus more on about 20 years ago, 2001, 2, 3, Alberta had a pretty significant drought. At that time, as it is now, our population was growing. Agriculture and industry were expanding and intensifying. And some of you might recall there was some pretty big drinking water events where some people died and some people got very sick in the 1990s in Walkerton and North Battleford when there was some contamination of the drinking water in those areas. That made all of the provinces all across Alberta really think hard about our drinking water, our water management, our infrastructure, and a lot of you municipalities might have been involved in some of the review of infrastructure at that time. Some of the basins in the south were hitting sort of the maximum amount of water that they could allocate. So that triggered some thinking as well. And really just thinking about our growing demand and our water resources across the province. So that all of that thinking led to the Water for Life strategy, which I think most of you are pretty familiar with. The minister at the time was Lauren Taylor. He did a lot of engagement with municipalities and all of the other sectors, and then drafted the Water for Life strategy. The strategy is still the overarching umbrella for water policy in the province today. And it has three major goals that sort of guide everybody in water management world, including safe, secure drinking water supplies, healthy aquatic ecosystems, and reliable quality supplies for a sustainable economy. Also in the strategy are three pillars around knowledge, partnerships, and conservation. And obviously it's partnerships that led to what we're going to talk to you about today with the watershed councils. You might be wondering, the really big shift in Water for Life in 20 years ago was a movement from recognizing not just water management, but watershed management. And you might have wondered, well, why did it sort of shift that way? And the Water for Life strategy talks about managing within the capacity of individual watersheds. And if you think about it, in the past, we've been familiar with water management sort of upstream, downstream. So if you're an upstream municipality and maybe you're releasing your wastewater, we need to do that in the right way so that we don't impact others downstream. So sort of those point sources along the river, we're used to thinking about upstream, downstream. But if we look across the watershed from sort of the height of land down to the lowest point, that's another axis we can think about what's happening as precipitation and snow come down and they run across the landscape and they go down to the lowest point, which is often a water body, a river, or a lake. And then there's a third axis we can think about, and that's that connection between groundwater and surface water. So really at the end of the day, water is a great indicator of everything else that we're doing across the landscape. So a watershed is a really great geographic unit to think about water management and how it integrates with land use management. It also grabs all of the people in that place and engages them in watershed management. And also it includes all the water bodies in that area. So lakes, rivers, wetlands, the whole works. So when we get to thinking about our watershed, so this is, you can see in the two colors, that's the entire Athabasca watershed. But we have a separate watershed council for the, and I think this is Megan's slide.
Yeah,
Megan, why do you have two WPACs?
So this slide here has a map that shows the entire Athabasca Basin. So the Athabasca Watershed Council's boundary is yellow, and then the Lesser Slave Watershed Council is in orange. The WPACs in the south were established so much earlier than the ones in the north, between 2003 and 5. Obviously, there was more prevalent water issues considering the overallocated basins and a lot of irrigators, mountain headwaters. And they had some active multi-sectoral organizations who were already working in those basins, and they moved into the role of becoming the WPACs, like our Bow River Basin Council and the Old Man Watershed Council. So the LSWC actually started in the 90s as a group of concerned citizens led by former High Prairie Mayor George Key, that's me, you may know. And he's also a lakefront guy, and he had people meeting to talk about things that they were seeing related to lake sustainability, fish, water levels, a lot of the same things we have today. And then in 2006, the committee formalized into a nonprofit, and then we received designation from the province as a WPAC in 2007. The Athabasca Watershed Council was formed and designated in 2009, and then the final 2 of 11 WPACs were the Mighty Peace Watershed in 2010 and the Southeast Alberta Watershed Alliance in 2011. So looking at this map, all of the water that ends up in Lesser Slave Lake flows down the Lesser Slave River about 75 kilometers, and it makes its way to the Athabasca near the town of Smith. And the flow that's leaving our watershed is about 4% of the mean annual discharge of the Athabasca River. And in the winter, when flows are lower, that might be more of a significant contribution depending on how much flow is coming down that river. So who are WPACs? Where's my notes? There we go. We're all registered nonprofit societies. Some of us have charitable designation as well. We all have a board of directors who governs us, and they represent the different sectors and rights holders in our watershed. So we all have different levels of government at the table: federal, provincial, municipal, and Indigenous. We have representatives from industry, including forestry, oil and gas, energy, ag, mining, utilities, tourism and economic development, and then a number of other sectors like our stewardship groups or NGOs, researchers or academic institutions, and members at large. And the specific board seats are outlined for each WPAC in our society bylaws. So we don't have statutory authority. We're advisory only, but we do have statutory authority at the table in the way of, say, municipal representatives, elected officials, and we do have representation from Alberta Environment and Protected Areas on all of our boards. And then each of us has an office and staff. So the AWC office is in the town of Athabasca. It's actually in the old train station building, very cute. You should check it out. And they have 6.5 staff. And the LSWC office is located in High Prairie, and we have 3 full-time positions and a seasonal. So getting into our WPAC roles. What do we do? So Petra introduced the Water for Life strategy and its goals and the recognition that there are partners. Following Water for Life, this secondary document called Enabling Partnerships was released. And this document further explores and outlines how each of the recognized Water for Life partners operates and what are some of the activities that we do. So this document says that the mandate of WPACs is to engage government stakeholders, other partnerships, and the public in watershed assessment and watershed management planning, considering existing land and resource plans and decision-making authorities. So since enabling partnerships and establishing ourselves as WPACs, we've all matured as organizations. We have grown our capacity, more staff people, lots of community connections. And since then, we have worked together with Environment and Protected Areas to update our mandates and roles through 2019, 2021 to better reflect both what we're doing and the expectations of WPACs and our partners at the Government of Alberta. So our 4 key roles are to act as a convener and a collaborator, to raise watershed and environmental literacy, to lead the development of collaborative watershed management plans and supporting their implementation, and to monitor and assess the condition of watersheds and report this information. And so in the next few slides, we're going to give you a little more detail on what each area of work looks like, but in reality, most of our work simultaneously supports each role. We're not doing them in silo. So as conveners and collaborators, which I think is weird to say, but it really speaks to the way in which WPACs bring people together to share information, identify watershed management challenges and issues, establish partnerships for projects, and foster connections between people, information, resources, and between each other as the WPACs. So some examples of things that we have done recently, we host municipal workshops, targeted agricultural stewardship workshops. For example, we hosted Building Resiliency to Multi-Year Drought in Grand Prairie and Athabasca in 2024 as a result of Alberta's drought conditions. These were going on all around the province as well. The 3 northern WPACs have partnered to host conferences in Grand Prairie called Water Management in Alberta's Boreal, with a focus on watershed issues and work going on in the north. We support, for example, the Lac La Biche Watershed Management Plan Implementation Committee or other local lake stewardship groups. And we support collaborative projects like the Riparian Web Portal, which I'm going to highlight later in our resources and tools section. All of the WPACs promote education and literacy in numerous ways and to numerous audiences. We all have a website where you can learn about our watershed, the WPAC boards and staff, and the projects we undertake and the programs we offer to, say, schools or teachers. Most of us, the Athabasca and the LSWC for sure, we deliver a lot of youth programs like classroom presentations and field trips where kids get to get out into a local wetland or water body and do some water testing and identify marsh monsters or benthic invertebrates. And these are always very fun. We participate in community events or events hosted by our partners to share resources on, say, lake stewardship, invasive species, we have a lot of resources on a lot of topics. And we host fun things like Kids Can Catch Day at our lake or, say, the Canoe Brigade on the Athabasca River. And we spend a lot of time producing resources either for the public or our watershed stakeholders that summarize a lot of technical information into plain language that's better utilized and understood by folks. In our planning and policy role, WPACs are tasked with the collaborative development of an integrated watershed management plan, which sets shared watershed objectives and then outlines recommendations and actions that when we implement will help us achieve those goals and objectives. Now, our WPAC watershed management plans are not statutory, so they don't have legal authority, but they serve as guidance documents for our decision makers like municipalities, the provincial government or regulators, industry, and even landowners. An example I like to use, even though it's not local, the Bow River Basin Council spent a lot of time and effort developing phosphorus water quality objectives for the Bow, and they had technical experts at the table, City of Calgary, irrigators, provincial representatives, and they followed a collaborative, consensus-based approach. Down the road, when the South Saskatchewan Regional Plan was being completed and the water quality frameworks were then being developed, they took the work that the Bow River Basin Council had done and basically utilized that into the regional plan framework. That's one good example. Right now we have a lower Athabasca regional plan in place, but not an upper. And both the Athabasca Watershed Council and the LSWC have completed an IWMP. And for the past few years, we have been working on implementation as resources permit, of course. And as we know, planning is cyclical. So now that our plans have been in the implementation phase for a while, we're now at a stage where we're going to be re-engaging and evaluating these plans, making a report on how implementation's going, and then updating them to capture new data that's available and ensure alignment with our watershed stakeholders and watershed priorities. So next slide. We also provide a watershed perspective into a number of other planning processes. So some examples of this is the land use framework. So I mentioned the Bow example, and then we have the LARP is the Lower Athabasca Regional Plan. sub-regional plans such as the South Oil Sands Plan or the Burland Plan. There's also the Caribou planning underway. Then, of course, your municipal development plans and land use bylaws. I know that I have been, your staff have reached out to me to provide some input there, and that's really great. And then different lake and sub-basin watershed management plans. So for example, the Lac La Biche Lake Management Plan. And then at a bigger scale, we have borders with the Northwest Territories and Saskatchewan, where we have transboundary waters bilateral agreements. And then recently, the formation of the Canada Water Agency. I'm going to pass it back to Petra now to carry on.
Yeah, so you might be wondering about, what's a watershed management plan versus a municipal planning document, and where do they sort of intersect? And if you go back to a few years ago when they updated the Municipal Government Act, it talks about fostering the well-being of the environment as a core purpose of municipalities. And so that fits really well, your mandate, with our mandate of supporting and working towards healthy aquatic ecosystems. So yeah, if you are updating your land use bylaw or your municipal development plans, or even down to area structure plans and subdivision plans, we're always happy to review those. And some of obviously the things that we're looking for are things that are associated to water bodies, shorelines, but also even things like how you might be using environmental reserve, or how you're managing your stormwater. So things like how you define hazard lands, that's often associated with a wet or low-lying or high-sloped area that's going into a water body. How you might be determining setbacks, especially for those of you, I'm not sure if we've got some summer villages online, but if you've got a property line that's fronting a water or the 30-meter buffer between a water body, we're always interested to see how you're deriving those setbacks. Some of you used to use that standard 6-meter setback from a water body. Some of you are using equations like the riparian setback matrix to just determine what those setbacks should be. Using things like environmental reserve, or some of you have municipal reserves as well around if you are maybe a summer village or a county with development around a lake. And also just in general, when we're reviewing your plans, we're just looking at how you might be managing wetlands, shorelines, and even your floodplains, and what development looks like and how it might be impacting the shoreline and the health of the water body. Those are all kind of things on your statutory side, but there's lots of best practices as well that might show up in your documents, but also you might just have other documents with best practices outlined, and we're always happy to review those and provide input as well. Things around stormwater management, things around how you store and manage your salt and snow for your transportation. Of course, we don't want snow piles and salt and sand piles draining where they might be draining off into a nearby water body. One area that we're trying to work more with municipalities is thinking about source water protection plans. So most of you, if you're involved with whether your municipality is involved with drinking water or you're involved with a commission, your drinking water treatment plant probably has a safe water drinking plan, but that's sort of where your intake pipe is and the plant itself. But you might be thinking about further upstream. What's happening further upstream that might be impacting your drinking water intake? And that's something, again, that we can help with, is getting together different municipalities and different upstream users and developing a plan that makes sure that anybody downstream who's drawing their source water, that we're taking that into account in everything that's going on in the upper watershed. More and more, we're getting involved with municipalities on things like, drought management, floodplain mapping. The government of Alberta has been doing a lot of floodplain mapping lately, and they're always eager for input. So if you want to talk about your particular area, if you don't have a floodplain map, again, we're happy to get you together with Government of Alberta and talk about whether that's feasible. And more, we're seeing municipalities involved with the different ALICE partnerships. If you don't know what ALICE is, again, we'd love to come and talk to you about that and how we're working with a lot of ALICE partners to help landowners with water management on private and county lands. There's probably lots of more areas where we're intersecting, and yeah, if you want to pop some of those in the chat, feel free to, or if you want to talk to us later on about how we might interact in some area of interest to municipalities. Megan and I are always both keen to talk to municipalities about that. Next slide, please. So moving out of the policy and planning world, we also do try to fill gaps that will down the road will help policy and planning. So we do lots of monitoring and reporting. We assess the condition of the watershed using different metrics and hopefully informed by whatever available science there is. Filling data gaps, sharing that watershed information in what we call state of the watershed reports or SAW reports. And of course, the state of the watershed reports sort of identify all of the issues and what we know about them. And then that in turn can inform different levels of planning, whether it's our watershed management plans or municipal plans or land use plans. All 11 watershed councils have now done at least one cycle of state of the watershed reporting. And so we've all learned from that process. And now most of us are starting at least our second round of state of the watershed assessment and reporting. And this time around, it's nice. We're seeing some new tools and some new processes by the different watershed councils. So for example, the Battle River Watershed Alliance in their last round, they didn't do just environmental metrics. They also included social metrics as well. And of course, we're all thinking about, could we also add economic metrics to our state of the watershed health? The Bow River Basin Council used a tool called the ESRI Experience Builder so that their state of watershed report isn't actually a printed report. It's all online and on an interactive dashboard. And I think more and more of us are looking at things like that as opposed to doing the old printed reports that sit on a shelf. The Milk River Watershed Council is kind of interesting too. They went beyond, because their watershed actually spans into Saskatchewan and Montana, they included input from Saskatchewan and Montana on one great big state of the watershed report. So some interesting things coming in the world of state of the watershed reporting. Next slide, please. We also do lots of assessments. So Megan's going to talk more about a tool called the Riparian Portal. But to date, we've assessed about 3.5% of the entire Athabasca, all the shorelines in the Athabasca, for their shoreline health. And then that information guides us as to where we need to go and do work to restore different shorelines. We also have been getting more and more into water quality sampling, and I know we go out and do some work in the Pembina, and Megan does work in the upper part of the tributaries that supply the lake. You might not know what benthic invertebrates are, but basically we also go out and do some bug sampling to see what's living in our rivers and our water bodies, and to see again if that reflects that the waters are healthy. And then we get out and actually, depending on where those areas are cropping up that we know need work, we get out and we work with landowners and municipalities to restore shorelines and try and improve water quality. So today, we figure our number is bigger than that. We actually have planted over 7,000 or 8,000 plants between our two watershed councils in the last few years. And then this last one, just recognizing that we have been really fortunate. Both our watershed councils have received a fair number of grants from the Government of Alberta's Watershed Restoration and Resiliency Program. I know we've received about $750,000, and I think we need to add Megan's into that as well. Next slide, please. I know some municipalities and board members often ask me, how are watershed councils funded? So we just thought we'd share this one quick slide. all 11 watershed councils do get a core operational grant from environment and protected areas. Right now, we're in the third year of a 4-year grant agreement with the province, and we're starting to talk about what the next 4-year grant agreement looks like. So that provides us funding sort of to keep some core staff around, to make sure that our boards are meeting regularly, and to do some education and outreach work. Then we try really hard to go out and find other grants and donations to match that government funding. So that could be from conservation groups and foundations, can be from industry, and also a lot of youth. So thank you to all of you municipalities that fund us. And that doesn't necessarily mean hard dollars, although we really appreciate those too. There's a lot of in-kind support. So all of the time that all of our boards are staffed, all of our directors commit time, and we really appreciate that time, and we do track it as in-kind support. We also have committees and working groups. We also partner up with, ag fieldmen and ag service boards to host events. And we work with lots of landowners. So all of that in kind is really almost as big as what our financial hard dollars are. And we track it and we use it as matching funds in a lot of our fundraising. Next slide, please. And I think this one's Megan's.
You bet. So more on our impact and reporting our collective statistics. So we all produce individual annual reports, which I hope we're all sharing with you and you get a look at once in a while. And then together as 11 WPACs, we have been over the last, I think we've been at it for 7 or 8 years now, collectively tracking a number of metrics so that we can produce a provincial summary of achievements and then share that with our provincial scale funding partners and groups like the Alberta Water Council. We definitely do this in part to ensure that the government of Alberta is seeing the value for their investment into the WPAC program, which they absolutely are getting. You can see that our infographic here is organized by each of the 4 roles we talked about, and it highlights some of our collective achievements. So tons of members across Alberta, volunteers, our education and engagement stats. Petra mentioned that we're all doing state of the watershed reports, and we have some statistics there. We also do our best to track all of our funders outside the GOA and account for all the other funding. And then, like Petra mentioned, our in-kind time. So over the past 4 years, the Alberta WPACs have leveraged the provincial investment of about $14 million into an additional $17.3 million in cash, and then $8.5 million in in-kind support. And I do always say we're probably underreporting the in-kind because it's really hard to keep track of all of those people hours or, time contributions that we may not be realizing that are even happening. So now I want to move into sharing some helpful tools and resources that are available to you guys, available to anybody. And we've kind of broken them down into the Water for Life goals, starting with the first one of safe, secure drinking water. So you guys have a big role in this as municipalities. And the population of our combined watersheds is roughly 200,000 people, which seems low compared to other parts of Alberta. We have about 112 urban, rural, and Indigenous communities. And then of those communities, about 75% of the population has access to municipally treated drinking water, and the remaining 25, so think like farmers, acreage owners, or folks living on the land, they might get their drinking water from groundwater wells, dugouts, a truck fill station, or bottled water, or even rain capture. And as drinking water providers, municipalities, you need to have a good understanding of current and future demand, your water supplies, and any shortages that may come up in the future, and a host of other things. So one of the tools I wanted to highlight for you today is called the Alberta Water Well Information Database. I often get inquiries from people who are not connected to municipal water, so farmers, acreage owners, and they're interested in drilling a well either for their home or for their home and livestock. And they have questions, especially if they're new to the area, like how good are the wells here? How deep do you have to drill? Like, what's the flow? What's the water quality issues? And I honestly don't have that information off the top of my head for any particular area, but this website has an interactive map. So the image on the right here, or sorry, left, when you zoom into an area, so this is actually the town of Athabasca, you zoom in close enough and little dots start popping up. All those little orange dots are a water well. It might be a historic one, it might be an active one, but there's a lot of dots. So, and then once you kind of find the area or the quarter section you're looking for, you can click on any one of those well dots and it'll pop up the water well ID, who the owner is, the drilling date, the depth, the static water level, the year it was drilled. It's a lot of information in there, and you can click on that link that says water well drilling report and you get all that as well. There are a lot of historic, like older wells in the system, and they don't have a complete water well drilling report, and they might just show up as a dot in the center of a quarter section. But this is one of the handy tools that I find myself going to quite often, and people seem to find it very useful as well. We do have a bunch of other resources listed here for you. There's Water North Coalition, the Alberta Water Wastewater Operator, the Alberta Water Council's website has a number of publications, and there's lots of relevant ones, drought management, source water protection. So we're gonna send a follow-up email to all of you guys that contains all these extra resources, and then you'll be able to just click the links. I know we're not gonna get into all of them here today. So moving on to our next category, reliable water supplies. So as Northerners, we know that just because most of the water in the province is in the Boreal region, it doesn't mean that it's readily available to us all the time or exactly when we need it. The last few years of drought have heightened concerns about long-term water supply, and there are municipalities in the Peace Country, Dawson Creek is the one that comes to mind, that are having community water supply issues right now, and it's a pretty serious situation. So in our watershed, in the Athabasca, most of the water comes from about 200 glaciers in the headwaters located in Jasper National Park. And then, of course, the rain and snow that falls over our watersheds throughout the year. So the mean annual discharge of the Athabasca River is 21 million dam cubes. It's a lot of water. So for comparison, the whole volume of Lesser Slave Lake is about 12.4 million dam cubes. So the total amount of flow in the Athabasca each year is about 1.7 times the amount of water held in Lesser Slave Lake. Those are big numbers. The key thing here is that there's a lot of water in the system. Only about 5% of the annual flow is allocated to license holders, and most of that is surface water licenses, but there are groundwater licenses as well. And most municipalities have pretty big water licenses that allow them room to grow population-wise, and they are historic, so they do have priority in the system. Alberta's water licensing system is first in time, first in right. So community drinking water is always a priority over other uses. So one of the tools I wanted to show you guys that helps address water supply is called the Alberta Water Tool. It covers the whole Athabasca Basin as well as the North Saskatchewan, I believe. And when you go into this website, again, we're going to send you all these things in a follow-up email. You don't have to write it down, but when you get into the main page, there's three sections, three main features you can choose from. There's watershed reporting, where you can click any stream and it'll highlight its watershed and generate a report, land area, how many licenses there are. There's a stream flow monitoring section where you can click on pretty much any point on any stream, and it'll give you a report with current and historic flow data. And then there's the water use analytics section where you can zoom in on the map, which is where my pictures are from. So this map is from the town of Slave Lake near the Lesser Slave River. And water licenses appear on the map as either blue for surface water or green dots for groundwater. I don't know if it's big enough. There's one green dot on this map on the to the north, but the one I circled here is once you click into it, it'll pop open a little box where it will show you who the license holder is. There's an ID associated with it, what type of license it is. So it's a surface water license, what the annual quantity is, what it's used for, the priority date. So this one dates back to 1965, and the status. So this one does not expire. And then you can get more information by clicking into it and getting a full report. This portal actually, this tool has lots of other cool features. A lot of it is helpful if you're, say thinking about where you could get another water license to support your growing water needs. So you could use this tool to query a subbasin and find out, how much of the flow has already been allocated to other license holders and how much, is available, which would indicate if it would be easy or harder for you to get the license you're looking for. In the north, we're not running into things like closed basins like in the south, but you never know how things might progress going forward. So tools like this help water managers at the, provincial scale manage and set things like water conservation objectives, and at which point they're not going to allocate any more water out to licenses. And then we have a number of other tools for you to check out that relate to water supplies. The Alberta River Basins one, you can check real-time flows. I know lots of folks have that app, and if you're into boating, jet boating, I know I have friends that check that one to see what the river flows are. You can view environmental records, you can view approvals, there's the flood hazards, and then a bunch of resources and tools for drought and drought management. So again, we'll send these to you guys in our follow-up email. And then our healthy aquatic ecosystems category. When we talk about healthy aquatic ecosystems, we include water and land, because we all know that what happens on the land has an influence on the aquatic environment too. So when we say healthy aquatic ecosystems, that kind of encompasses everything from water quality, habitat, also aquatic, but also wetlands, riparian areas, and the upland areas, talking about our biodiversity and species at risk as well. And there's a number of places where you can access and view data sets. A bunch are listed here, and I'm going to show you our riparian web portal that Petra mentioned earlier. So another website that starts with an interactive viewer, and when you get into it, it's the whole map of Alberta, and then we zoom into our area. I always look for the big lake and start zooming. So as you get closer to an area of interest, the major watershed boundaries are highlighted. And then as you zoom in even further, any riparian intactness assessment data will pop up as little
there we
green.
Go. Oh, sorry, there was just a delay in the slide, but it's there now.
Okay, sorry about that. So yeah, the picture on the left is at the bigger or smaller scale, and then on the right is the little square I've zoomed in here, and you can see the intactness data from the LSWC's riparian assessment of the Lesser Slave River and its tributaries. So when you zoom in even closer, rivers have a left bank and a right bank, so you can see the condition score. It's green to red on both sides of the bank. And then WPACs can use this information to target areas where we want to reach out to, say, land managers for perhaps targeted restoration work, or working on, say, a landowner engagement campaign where we could talk to folks about stewardship opportunities and funding. Recently, I did workshops with Big Lakes and MD of Lesser Slave River, promoting opportunities out to our agricultural producers to do riparian and wetland type work. And then As Petra mentioned earlier, we have assessed about 7,600 kilometers of shorelines between the two of us, and that's a lot of data and information. So this portal makes it really easy to view it. And then this information is also accessible to you guys as municipalities, either from us or the province makes these data sets available in their geospatial data center. And your staff could take it and integrate it into your geospatial layers where you can look at it when assessing planning and development, your ag fieldmen, maybe targeting stewardship or extension, or even your public works staff. It's a pretty cool tool. There's also a ton of resources in there. So if you're thinking, oh, where will I find information about riparian stewardship? It's definitely in this portal. It's organized by landowner type. Like there's a section for lakeshore property owners, a section for ag producers, acreages. There's a lot of good stuff in there if you got a few minutes to explore it. And I'm going to turn it back over to Petra now.
Okay, and I see the slide's already advanced on mine. Is it on yours too? Does it say many other tools for another day? Yeah, okay, sorry. Yeah, so just sort of by now you probably know that the Watershed Councils we touch on a lot of things. And so we really stay up to date on anything that the province or the feds or anybody else are doing around water management. So if you do hear something and you want to hear more about it, again, we're happy to come out and talk to or host a webinar or something to talk about all the different water management tools and things that are going on. And I was going to remind you, we say WPACs all the time, but we got to remember that's watershed planning and advisory councils. So not only do we kind of stay up to date on this, we are more and more being asked by Government of Alberta and others to provide our advice. And when Megan and I provide, WPAC advice, we're collecting your thoughts first, and then we're coming to consensus on what is our advice, and then we move it forward. A really good example of that at the federal level was a while back. The federal government was looking for advice on what the Canada Water Agency should be. And I think most watershed councils went and had, a discussion at their board levels. Some of them provided advice through the engagement process. Some of them got together and wrote a letter. Some of them just provided advice or had that discussion. And we're doing that more and more. That advisory role is really important. And that can span, it might be legislation. I think all of us probably have been pretty involved in the recent water availability discussions that resulted in the new Bill 7, which is being approved in the next short while. But in the past, we've also given advice to things like changes to the Public Lands Act. It might be regulations underneath Alberta Land Stewardship Act. All of the planning occurs. So the Lower Athabasca Regional Plan and the sub-regional plans are actually regulations underneath the ALSA, Alberta Land Stewardship Act. And we've definitely, I'm sure many of you have been very involved in the engagement for any of the regional or sub-regional planning. We've provided advice to the transboundary agreements, the wetland policy. But there's also other things. There's lots of guidance on things like watercourse crossings, pipeline crossings, forestry management agreements, and lots of different knowledge pieces like the long-term river water quality monitoring network. And so we're always trying to hear from all of our sectors in our basin and then feed that advice and any issues up to provincial and federal government initiatives on all of those provincial water management tools. And then just on the municipal side of thing, I just wanted to, again, we've mentioned it in a few places, but I just really want to highlight, if you go to the Alberta Water Council projects page, there are a lot of good pieces of work done on things like drought, conservation, source water protection. So I really encourage you to check that out. There's even some videos that can be shared with councils and reports. Similarly, the Alberta Municipalities has a good web page. It's just called Water Management, and another one called Water Conservation. Again, just some good places if you are interested in water and looking for some places to start. And another one is the Alberta Low Impact Development Partnership resources page. They've got a really nice clean runoff guide and a lot of things around stormwater management. And also just encourage you too, you might know of some great municipal water resources and tools as well. And if you do, we appreciate you sharing those. You can pop them in the chat or send us an email later on. And we'll put it on our growing list that will circulate to everybody of tools that you use and appreciate to help understand water management in your particular area. Next slide, please. Coming to an end, we just want to share that we are starting a really super big project that we're really excited about. It's all three of the Northern Watershed Councils, so the Mighty Peace, the Lesser Slave, and the Athabasca. We'll be partnering with Alberta Water Smart. It's a pretty ambitious project. You'll see there's a budget line there for about $2 million. So we're in the fundraising stage right now. But this has been done for all of the southern basins. The North Saskatchewan's just done it, and the South Sask did it a few years back. And it's really taking a really intensive look at what are our current water demand and supply, and how might that change in the future? So what might climate change do to our water supply? What might economic growth and population growth do to our future supply? And where might we see some pinch points in the future? And how does that inform how we manage water today? So we're really hoping that municipalities will participate in this. It's going to be in a collaborative engagement process, and really think about how much water you have today. If you think you have enough water for whatever your growth is in the future. And then we'll be doing the same with all of the other sectors, all the different industries, really getting them to think about what your water needs today and maybe 10 years from now, maybe 25 years from now. That'll all go into a great model, and then hopefully we'll have some really great discussions about how we need to manage our water supply going forward. And I think that's all I need to say about that. Next slide. Megan, anything else you've got before we go into questions?
I feel like we gave them a lot of information, resources and tools, probably a bit of information overload. I'm not sure if there's anything more to add here today other than we're always available to help you with whatever your research or information needs are. We can connect you with folks from the province, whether it's like Petra mentioned in the flood mapping branch, river forecasting. We have folks on our boards that are kind of our one window. So, we could reach out and ask them on behalf of one of our municipalities for, a presentation or a GOA staff person to assist them with something. And I spend a lot of time just connecting people with each other, convening and collaborating, right?
Yeah.